You may have heard that Jensen Huang, CEO of Nvidia, has 55 direct reports and doesn't believe in having one-to-ones with them. In spite of the fact that his company is arguably one of the most successful in the world right now, I imagine we can all agree that 55 direct reports is generally not a good idea. So how many reports should you have? Is there a maximum? Is there a minimum? That's the question I'm going to explore in this video. Hey, how's it going? This is Scruffy Leadership, a YouTube channel about management and leadership. My name's Ben, and I've been a leader and a manager in the tech industry for over 25 years. As CEO of one of the 3 largest companies in the world, Jensen Huang has a very unusual model of management, which I don't think would necessarily work well for very many other leaders. It works for him perhaps because his reports are all in very senior roles. He doesn't do one-to-ones because he doesn't believe in siloing information, which makes sense, but perhaps only in an environment in which the purpose of one-to-ones is just for sharing information. For most of us, one-to-ones are more about growth and development than they are about sharing information, which means they're actually essential. Jensen Huang's reports presumably are experienced enough to handle their own growth and don't need that much support in the form of one-to-ones. So assuming you don't have vice presidents reporting to you, how many reports should you have? If you Google this question, you tend to find answers roughly in the range of 5 to 10, and I think that's probably about right, but let's talk a bit about why. First of all, why is there a lower bound? Why not say 1 to 10? Now, I don't think this is actually much to do with the individual relationship, but rather to do with organizational structure. If you have a single report, you can devote a lot of attention to them. And this is probably fantastic for that report as long as it doesn't cause you to devote too much attention to them. So as long as you're not micromanaging them. But imagine an organization in which lots of managers have just 1 report each. The problem is I think this happens because people are becoming managers for the wrong reasons. It's not because the organization needs a manager, but because someone wants to become a manager because they think it's the best way to advance their career. And the problem with this is that it means that the individual who is their manager's only report doesn't really have a manager. They have an individual contributor who happens to be managing them. So how invested is that manager in their skills as a manager and a leader? How invested is the organization in them as a leader? How much actionable feedback on their management style does that manager get from their 1 report? I'd say that the answer to all those questions is likely to be not enough. If you start out as a manager with a single report and the plan is to grow your team so you have more, then that's perfectly valid. But I think it should be rare in organizations that managers have just 1 or 2 reports for the long term. Now, there will certainly be exceptions to this, especially with relatively unusual specialisms where it really does make sense to have this set up in the long term. But I do think it should be the exception rather than the rule to ensure that we all continue to see management as a skill in itself, not just a role for convenience. So what about the upper limit? Why 10? Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, as a result of an unexpected organizational change, I ended up with 25 direct reports. Thankfully, this only lasted about a week or so because my main priority in this situation was to set up a better reporting structure within my team. So within 10 days, I got myself down to 15 direct reports by having reports of mine become managers. And a month after that, I was down to 10. This is one of the most stressful times I've had in my working life for a variety of reasons, but the sheer number of direct reports that I had was definitely a factor. And these were people to whom I had a direct responsibility. I was responsible for their career development, for their individual growth, and all those decisions that I made about changing reporting lines were stressful in themselves, as most of them involved people moving down the organizational ladder. But like I said, I knew that the most important thing I could do in this situation was to get myself to a place where I had a manageable number of reports. Now, maybe this sounds selfish, and to some extent it was, but mostly actually it was about my ability to do a good job as a manager for these people. With 25 direct reports, the only way you can effectively manage all of them is if you literally do nothing else at all. And that might be feasible, perhaps in some environments, but in most situations I've experienced, as a manager you have responsibility for projects and deliverables, and you have responsibility for the team as a whole, not just the individuals within it. And that means there's only a finite amount of your time that you can spend on managing individuals. Even managing 15 was tough for me. It was made harder by the fact that some of them were in London, where I'm based, and some were in California, 8 time zones away. But even if all 15 had been in London, I think it would have been hard to do full justice to the role. To put it another way, if you manage 15 or more people, then you're almost certainly sacrificing something. It could be your own well-being, it could be your time spent managing the team, it could be your time spent on projects and deliverables, or it could be your time spent actually focused on managing those people. Unfortunately, in most cases, I think it's either the individual manager's well-being or the management role that suffer. And that's because those are the ones that are the least visible to senior stakeholders. So what this means is, if you find yourself in a situation in which your number of reports is going up either slowly or quickly, you need to be planning to restructure your team. And that means identifying as early as possible who in your team is interested in managing and who you think has the right characteristics to be a good manager. And you need to be preparing yourself and them and the rest of the team for a time when this person will start managing. Ideally, you need to be preparing well in advance of when you need them to take on their first reports. As I mentioned, this kind of restructuring can be painful, and inevitably some of the people who are not being made managers will be unhappy about the change. In my experience, the more transparent you can be with the process and the more time you give everyone to get used to the idea, the better. In some cases, for example, I've told people when I hire them that I'm going to be their manager for now, but that as the team grows, I plan to bring in managers under me and that I expect them to end up reporting to someone else. I mentioned that I think situations in which an individual has a single report are often not a good long-term setup, and that this was related to the reasons that people become managers in the first place. For more on that subject, check out the video that's on screen now. And if you have thoughts or questions about how many reports managers should have, particularly if you disagree with what I've said in this video, why not share them in the comments below? And the same goes if you have any ideas for subjects you'd like to see me cover in future videos. Bye. See you soon.